Morning, everybody. It is Tuesday morning, and Shay's back with us today because Jackie and I were traveling last week. Looks like we're live now. Good morning, and I am waiting for people to come on board. Anyway, welcome everybody to Turnaround Tuesday. We're starting out this morning, and I see Shay, you're on. And Shay, I missed you last week. Because last week Jackie and I were traveling, so Jackie and I, if you didn't see it, please go back and take a look at Turnaround Tuesday last week. We took a look at it. We talked about what Jackie would be doing as First Lady and some of the things we're doing this morning. But good morning, Madison. Good morning, Jeff. Good morning, Carrie. Welcome, everybody. And I picked up a little bit of I just noticed my hair's a little messed up there, Shay. How do I fix that? No, I'm kidding. She's like, she want me to fix the hair. I think Clara and Jackie will probably say your hair was sticking up today. How's that? Anyway, this morning, everybody, thank you for being here this morning. Madison, James, great to see you guys. Yo, James, how's it going? But anyway, thank you guys all for being here today. Today we're going to talk. It's a topic that continues to keep coming up, and it's about our investment funds. And it's about how we invest in New Mexico and what we do with our funds. So saying that, let's jump right into it very, very briefly. First of all, let me make this very clear. I think there's some confusion about the funds. We are not talking about the retirement funds for state employees, for teachers, for those type of funds. We're not talking about those funds. What we're talking about is a state investment. The state has their own funds, and there's literally 4 funds. The Land Grant Fund, which has over $16 billion in it. The Severance Fund, which is over $5 billion. The Tobacco Settlement Fund that we all know about. The Water Trust Permanent Fund. And those are really the 4 main funds. And when you add all 4 of them up, they total about a little bit over $23 billion. And our State Investment Council invests those funds for the state. And they invest it into Texas, they invested into Oklahoma, they invested into bonds and T-bills, and they invested into Wall Street, they invested into overseas, into agriculture, and things like that. So that's what we do, they're investment funds. And we have the State Investment Council that invests into those funds. Now, yes, we invest those funds and we grow those funds. And the State Investment Council has literally grown the funds in the last 10 years from $14 billion to $23 billion. So they continue to grow them, and that's great. But let me tell you, some of my opponent sister says, we can't touch those funds. Those funds have to be taken seriously. Those funds are for our future. Some of the legislators call it rainy day funds. Those funds are for our next generation. That's what you hear. And in reality, as I've been saying the whole campaign, we're in the middle of a hurricane and the roof just got blown off, and we won't invest back into our own state. Now let me give you a little example. Here's a shot. Hopefully everybody can see it. But here are the state investment funds around the country. And this little guy right over here, this little guy right there is Colorado. Colorado has 2.4% unemployment. We have 6.2 now. We're at 6.7. We're down to 6.2. But look at this chart right here. $23 billion. So look at the states around us. You're looking at California. California is at $8 billion, which is right here. Wyoming, North Dakota. And all these funds come from oil and gas, or all these funds come from our mining. So we've been putting them away for about 50 years. And so now we sit on $23 billion. So I just want you to look at this chart. They're the 3rd largest funds in the country, 14 largest funds in the world. So everybody can see. Now let's look at this. This is our unemployment. And in 2008, our unemployment was actually at 4.5, and in 2016, 2017, we're at 6.7. Now, if you take a look at that, you've actually seen our unemployment go up. So our unemployment has gone up. Our unemployment has gone up as our funds have. And why does our unemployment continue to go up when they should be going down? And that's my point. Now, we have seen job growth in the last 12 months, so that's a positive thing. Our unemployment's now to about 6.2. And if you look at New Mexico, if you look at Albuquerque, or if you look at Las Cruces, their actual unemployment is now below 6 at 5.8. So we're seeing some of the growth. When you look at the growth, most of that growth has come back from oil and gas. Oil and gas continues to grow. So I think we've created about 6,000 jobs in oil and gas. Construction is starting to pick up a little bit in some of the bigger cities. So you're seeing about 11,000 new jobs in construction in the last 8 to 12 months. Again, all positive moves, but we still sit with us, the highest unemployment in the country when we sit on $23 billion. Now, my opponent will tell you that those funds are not to be touched. Those funds are not to be drained or taken out, and that's not what we're talking about. The State Investment Council invests those funds, so the land grant fund, the severance fund, the tobacco fund, and the water trust fund, all with about $23 billion. They invested, and they invested into Texas, they invested into Oklahoma, they invested into Wall Street, and they make a return. And some are very conservative, and some are a little bit more. But they literally invested into bonds, into T-bills, into Wall Street, into agriculture, into long-term debt financing. And so all we're proposing is let's take 5% of our money and invest it back into New Mexico. Now I go around the state and I talk to people and say, guess what the number one issue in the state is? And everybody says crime, everybody says unemployment, everybody says education. Those are all very important, and I always say those are 1A. The number one issue in our state is we have no private capital that invests into our state, and that's what we have to change. Today, 84% on every dollar that comes into our state literally invests it's state and federal dollars. So we have no private capital. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. We will invest into New Mexico, and our proposal is 95% of our economy is small business. And when you invest into small business, you will help small business grow and expand. And by doing that, we will create 75 to 100,000 new jobs in the state of New Mexico within the first 12 and 18 months. Because the number one issue if you talk to small business is they don't have any private capital to help them grow. And over 75% of our small businesses, our secondary economy, let's call it, needs to grow. So we can spend millions of dollars to try and bring the Amazons, the Facebooks of the world here, which is great, but if we put those resources into small business and help small business grow, that's exactly how we grow our economy. We'll talk a little bit about that. So that's what we're saying. So if you take 5% of our $23 billion, it's about $1.4 billion. Now, we're going to invest $1 billion of it into low debt finance loans into small businesses to get the economy rolling. We're also going to take $400 million, up to $420 million, because out of the severance fund, by state statute, we can take up to 9% of that fund and invest it back into New Mexico technologies, New Mexico industries. And we want to do that into renewables. We want to do that into biotechnology, into cybersecurity, things that we've been talking about the whole campaign. By doing that, we'll start creating more and more jobs that will stay here. Now we know this. Medium-sized companies leave our state because we haven't invested into infrastructure to keep them here. Medium-sized companies leave our state as they grow. They need more trained workforce, and we haven't trained our workforce for that. And so those are the things that we're talking about as we kind of move forward. Now let's talk a little bit about that. The land grant fund. Now, my opponent says, you know, Jeff acts like those funds are just sitting around a bank. We know they're not sitting around a bank. You've heard me talk about they're investing outside our state. Now, folks, let me tell you, we do use those funds. We use the interest on those funds. So we take about 5% of the land grant fund, which is anywhere between $1 billion to $1.1 billion. It's a 5-year, they take 5% of a 5-year average. So it always comes around $1 billion to $1.1 billion, let's call it. So by investing that money, and they get a 6 to 8% return on average, when you take a look at that, and they take about $1 billion. Now that money goes into our educational pool, goes into the general fund, and a third of that goes into our educational pool, right? And so we know that's very important for that. So I'm not against that. What we can do is by investing back into New Mexico and getting a 2.5% return on our investment, yes. We will make $21 million less a year in interest. So instead of putting $1.1 billion into the educational pool, we'll put $1,880 million, right? So we'll be short $21 million. But we feel we can make that money up by looking at other ways to fund from PED down. So let me just clarify that. But at the same time, and I know these are a lot of numbers, at the same time, as we create jobs, we're going to create over $400 million in new tax revenues within the first 18 to 24 months of my administration. Now, what our legislators and what my opponent does not want to talk about, and I'm going to be very frank with you, because they're about the status quo. She's about talking about the status quo, about doing the same things over and over and over. And what we're talking about is investing. And when you start doing that, we will generate over $400 million in new tax revenues. Now, let me tell you something. I want you to go back and Google it. Don't listen to me. Go back and Google it. I want you to go back and Google in 2006, 2007, 2008, 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. And look what our state budget was. We're actually making $600,000 less, $600 million less in tax revenue annually every year because we lost over 146,000 jobs in the last 10 years. Yes, we've grown some of it back, so we're net out about 100,000 jobs. And 57,000 New Mexicans are left. So folks, when you lose jobs and you lose people moving your state, you lose tax revenue, and we lost about $600 million in tax revenue in the last 10 years. So when our schools are getting our budgets cut, when our universities are getting their budgets cut, when state employees are getting their budgets cut, when services, police officers, state police, I mean, I was talking to Mayor Tim Keller here in Albuquerque about a week ago, they've actually raised their taxes based on that because they need tax revenue, right? So that's what we're talking about. Anyway, let's get into it real quick before we start to answer some questions. So what are we going to do with that $1 billion when we invest it into small businesses? Well, we're going to invest it into standard New Mexico small businesses that'll grow small businesses by 75 to 100,000 new jobs. Then we're going to invest into agriculture. We've talked about it before. We need to start investing into agriculture, and that's including expanding our value-added agriculture within our pecans, within our green chilies, and then we want to start up north and in the Midwest area, in the central New Mexico area. We want to invest into agriculture. We want to invest into high-tech jobs and those kind of things. So those are the things that we're talking about and how we're going to invest into that. And when you start looking at that, when you start looking at agriculture, you start looking at high-tech, biotechnology, film and television, renewable energies, and then we need to train our kids in trade skills, ecotourism, and then healthcare. These are the opportunities we're talking about. And then next week, I think we're going to talk about more opportunities with cannabis and hemp. But those are opportunities that we're looking at over 225,000 new jobs for the state of New Mexico by doing that. So now that's kind of a summary. So I think that's where I think everybody kind of understands the investments. It just continues to be a question as we come up. So we're about 12, 14 minutes into it. So I want to start taking some questions real quick. I know Shay's writing some questions, and I'm seeing some people bouncing in and out. And so, but let me kind of bring up one quick thing. Some of the things, and it's coming from some of the older generations, they're worried about their kids and their grandkids. One of the questions that always comes up is, I don't want you to deplete those funds. And again, we're not talking about spending the money. We're not talking about taking the money out. We're talking about investing the money into New Mexico at a 2.5% return and growing those funds just at 2.5% instead of 6%. But the job creation and the job growth will be so much more as we go. And other people have brought up well, we're really worried about those funds because those funds are for our kids and our grandkids. And actually they are. And that's why we want to invest them back into New Mexico. We want to invest in New Mexico to create jobs, to create opportunities, to create trained skill jobs for our kids and our grandkids so our kids do stay here. Folks, 75% of our college graduates are leaving our state. And 57,000 New Mexicans have left our state in the last 6 years. So we have to keep them here. One of the questions we got was, with these funds, are you going to invest in elementary and education programs? We need to keep our kids engaged. Now, we talked about this last week with Jackie. We're not going to invest the $1 billion we're talking about investing low debt finance loans into New Mexico industries. We're not talking about that for education. Now, what we have done is we have found over $225 million in the public education department budgets that we can move into our communities from the bottom up. So that's what we've been talking about, and that's about 225,000 new jobs. I mean, $225 million going back into our education. And we talked about education last week. So yes, we have to keep our kids engaged on that point. Another question that came up this morning before we went live is broadband. Are we going to use some of these funds for broadband? Again, these funds are to invest into New Mexico industries, New Mexico technologies, things like that. The infrastructure funds will come from grants from the federal government, and then we're going to talk about tax reform in a few weeks. We'll talk a little bit about tax reform then. But you are correct. I think it was Brad that wrote that. You are correct, Brad. Over 50% of our kids in New Mexico do not have high-speed internet access, broadband. We have to invest in that. And you've heard me talk about it before. Our political leaders haven't really worked together in the past to basically bring federal and state funding together. So we have to do that together as we move forward. By doing that, we can invest into broadband technology. We have to do that for two reasons. One, if you go around the state and see Title I schools, some of the Title I schools have some of the greatest technology, some of the greatest computers in their classrooms, but then we don't fund computer science teachers and we don't fund teachers in that classroom, or some of those schools don't have broadband access, so the computers don't even work for the kids. It's become a very high expensive playground for the kids. So our proposal is let's get broadband. But more importantly than anything else is almost 50% of the jobs in today's economy for 35 and under are what they call telecommuting jobs. And by investing into broadband, by investing into job training and keeping these kids engaged, one of the things that we're talking about is telecommuting jobs. Now, those telecommuting jobs, on average in the United States, they pay about $83,000 a year on average, and we can grow those jobs here in New Mexico. Half of our kids, or half of the people under 35, can't even do those jobs because the rural communities or areas that we live in don't have those broadband things. So yes, we will work with the federal government. We will work with our U.S. senators to make sure that we get infrastructure funding to expand that. And to my knowledge, and some of the conversations I've had with some of our U.S. senators, between our governor and our U.S. senators and some of the lack of communications, we have passed on probably about $1.4 billion in the last few years on infrastructure that we know that we need. So those are things that we'll work on too. We're getting a couple more questions. I know we're 20 minutes into it. I know we want to try and keep it to 30 minutes. So I know this is a lot of numbers, but again, real simple, real quick, and we'll make it. What industry shows job growth? What industries show job growth? That's from Riley in Albuquerque. Riley, thanks for the questions. So the industries we're looking at is, first of all, 95% of our economy is small business. And we talked about it. The number one issue is there's lack of capital to help those companies grow. So as we invest into small business in New Mexico, those small businesses will grow. Now, Riley, across the board, those small businesses will be across the board in New Mexico, because there's going to be some high-tech businesses. There's going to be ecotourism businesses, things like that. The other thing we want to do with the severance fund, we want to invest up to $420 million. Now, they've already invested about $100 million. We want to invest into cybersecurity, biotechnology, tech transfer out of our labs and our universities. We're doing that every day here. But what happens is our companies leave our state. Those companies leave the state once they get there. So we want to use some of these funds and develop these funds for not only startups, but second and third round funding to keep those companies here. And folks, let me tell you something. Why we're talking about $1 billion, as we invest $1 billion, Jackie and I were up in Colorado for spring break last week with some friends, and they're biotechnology investors. They invest into technologies. They literally will invest with us in New Mexico. So the $1 billion that we would invest into New Mexico industries, we believe $2 to $3 billion will follow from private capital. So we'll have $3 to $4 billion of private capital funding in there immediately. So let me see. Our next question, Eric from Las Cruces. How about GRT and property tax abatements for new businesses? Eric, that's a good question. I think it was Eric. Eric, that's a good question from Las Cruces. In fact, we'll be in Las Cruces in a few weeks doing some campaigning. I think there's a gubernatorial forum down there. We're going to talk about tax reform in a couple of weeks. We've kind of mentioned it, but we have talked about tax reform. We do believe that the GRT, on the business side, small businesses kind of get hurt with GRT. So we're, as we grow our economy, we can't go cold turkey, Eric. That's one of the things. We can't go cold turkey on GRT because our grocery receipts tax is about 50% of our tax revenue for our state. So we need that right now. But as we grow the economy and as we grow the economy and grow jobs and grow our tax revenue, we feel there's taxes that we can lower. Now we'll talk more about property taxes overall and business taxes that we think will incentivize small businesses to grow here in the state of New Mexico. But we're going to talk about tax reform in a couple of weeks, so I'll say some of the things about that, Eric. But yes, we are looking at that. We do think, folks, just on a real quick note, our tax system in the state of New Mexico has literally been around for about 50 years. And I've always kind of said this time and time again, depending on your lobbyist. If you have a good lobbyist, you pay no taxes. If you don't have a good lobbyist, you pay 6 to 8% taxes on your corporate taxes or different things like that. So we do believe there needs to be some tax reform across the board as we kind of move forward on this. So Eric, thank you for that question. We have another question here. David from Albuquerque, how will you transform New Mexico to be a trained, qualified workforce for these new jobs? David, that's a great question. So let's talk about that. So the 225,000 new jobs, investing our funds back into New Mexico. So we know that 79 to 100,000, so let's say 40 to 50% of our jobs are going to come from small business, and small business is going to grow. But we know that 20 to 40,000 jobs are going to come from the trade skills. So you're correct. So part of our education plan that we talked about last week, or go to our website, apo18.com, and look at our educational plan. We have to bring the trade skills back to our state, into our schools, and train our kids within the trade skills. Telecommuting jobs. Those are coding, computer programs. We have to invest into our community colleges and make sure those programs are there to train our kids for those jobs. And then within the startup technology jobs. But let me give you an example, David. Los Alamos. I was up in Los Alamos campaigning this summer, and one of the things Los Alamos is talking about, one of their number one concern is in the next 6 years, they're going to need 4,000 technicians. And we're really not training New Mexicans for those jobs. So my proposal is Northern College right there in Espanola, let's give them funding and let's start training 4,000 technicians, because we know Los Alamos is not going to go away. So we can invest into training kids in technology jobs, technical jobs for Los Alamos, that we know those jobs are going to be there. Same happened in Sandia, same happened in New Mexico Tech. So there's opportunities there. New Mexico State has a great agriculture program. As we invest into agriculture, as private capital invests in agriculture, and we expand into hops production co-ops, and we expand into hemp and cannabis production, we can literally train kids and work with those kids to train those. We talked about film and television. We have announced an international film school that we're going to put in New Mexico, in Santa Fe, and train kids. Today's film industry shuts down by August. In fact, I was talking to someone last night about Santa Fe Studios, and one of the producers there is working on a $20 million film that they're probably going to go to Canada with, because the cap and the incentives program we have in New Mexico is literally cutting some of the film and television back by August. So our goal is to raise the cap, stop deferring the payments, get the payments done now. But as we grow 12 to 16,000 new jobs in film and television, David, our goal is to make sure that we're training New Mexican kids for those new jobs. Today, there's 16,000 jobs in film and television. 75% of them are residents, but half of those, if not more, have been transplants here, which is great. But I want to make sure New Mexicans have an opportunity to have those job growth. So we're 23 minutes, almost 24 minutes into it. I know we want to try and stay like at a half hour. So is this Maury?
Mary.
Oh, Mary. This will be the last question. And then if we have any other questions, please feel free to email us. Who will be responsible for picking those investments? Mary, those are very good questions. There's a couple of things. One, the $420 million out of the severance fund, there's already programs there. They're run by Sun Mountain, which is an investment fund that's managing our $23 billion, by the way. So there's already a program there that we can already use, and that's fine. I do believe that we should bring in 10 more Sun Mountains. Now, Sun Mountain's doing a great job, probably a little conservative for me, but they're doing a great job, and they've helped grow our funds. My point is for us to get more private capital here, we need to expand partnerships. So one of our deals is, so let's talk about biotechnology. So my proposal is, let's move $25 million of our funds into a biotechnology fund. We start biotechnology research companies every day at the University of New Mexico, and they leave our state because we're not funding them. So we propose to move $25 million into a biotechnology fund, which, by the way, Mary, when we've done this, our funds have made a 10% return over the long haul. So keep that in mind. we will be making money back on these investments by doing that. We will entice biotechnology investment firms from outside our state to come in our state and basically invest with us. So now we have a $50 million fund invested in the biotechnology research that we do here every day and keep them here. The $1 billion investments into small business and small entities, there are multiple programs that we can use that already exist. There are state programs that already exist for small business. There are programs within our banking system that we can use that we've talked about. So it wouldn't be the state doing it, but there are programs already in place. We just have to fund them. We've never funded them or worked with the banks to make sure. You've heard me say this before, Mary. Interstate banking has actually hurt the state of New Mexico a little bit because in 30 years ago, when there was no interstate banking, you knew your bankers and you could get loans to small businesses and kind of grow that way. Today, interstate banking, Wells Fargo, if they can make a better return on our investments going outside our state, they will do that. We make a little bit more money, they make money, but my point is let's move 5% of it back in. So, Mary, I hope I answered your question, but there's state programs that already exist. We've just never funded them. And then there are our banking partners that we can invest with. So, thank you. I think we have one more question. Nope. Okay, I think that's it for today. I hope that makes sense. We're getting a lot of questions on the campaign trail about the investments. So let me recap just real quick. These investments are not pension funds. These investments are not your state employees or your teachers' investment funds. These are our state permanent funds. These are the state permanent funds that the funds continue to grow, and we live off the interest on those funds, not against them. All we're proposing is let's move 5% of that money and invest it into New Mexico technologies, New Mexico industries, New Mexico small businesses, grow jobs here, grow those funds, maybe at a smaller return, but grow those funds, and we actually generate more revenue on tax revenue based on that. And then we've talked about the agricultural thing. Now, what I would ask you, if you want to take a look at a complete breakdown, go to our website, apo18.com. I love all these props there and shit. Go to apo18.com. This is our jobs plan. Apo18.com. You can see our jobs plan. But folks, let me remind you, we sit on 23 billion. Colorado, 550 million. They have 2.2% unemployment. We're at 6.2% unemployment. So it's about investing into ourselves. It's about investing into new ideas and a new direction and investing into New Mexico. Every state around us, every state in the country is literally continuing to see record-breaking economic growth. We will invest into New Mexico. We will create 225,000 new jobs. My opponent continues to say what we can't do. And I think it's time we have a governor that says what we can do. And what we can do is invest into New Mexico, invest into these verticals, create 225,000 new jobs, improve our unemployment, give opportunities for our kids, both at the school level, at the educational level, at the job level. Anyway, thank you all so much. We will be around. We're going to be up in Rio Arriba, Espanola this weekend, Las Vegas this weekend. Thursday at 2 o'clock, there is a gubernatorial forum. My opponent has agreed to show up finally. So let's see, hopefully she does show up. It's about behavioral health and some of the disability and some of the long-term care that we're going to be having a debate. So it's a forum. So Thursday around 2 o'clock, we'll stream it live on our website if it's not streamed live. Take a look at it. We really need your help. We're raising money to stay on TV. We need more volunteers. We're doing full banking, canvassing. So anybody who wants to help out, please reach out to our campaign. Please reach out to us. Thank you all very much for being here, and we'll talk next week on Turnaround Tuesday. Thanks, everybody.